Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 51st episode of the Inbox, starting off with a question from Nookie Monster saying that these are the best Star Citizen vids. Thank you, Nookie. His question is, do you think we will or should have blast shields for cockpit glass when entering atmosphere? Maybe even blackout for comms like we have in today's incoming spacecraft. I think that would probably be more of a thing if the cockpit glass wasn't designed to be incredibly durable. At least on the Anvil and RSI ships, I believe it's actually supposed to be some like diamond composite that's supposed to be as strong, if not stronger than the hull of the ship. So if that's actually the case, I don't think it's really as necessary. The other part of it is you actually have shielding on your ship. So the shield is actually kind of providing you with some of the protection that's needed. Now, one thing that would be interesting is what happens if you try and enter an atmosphere without a shield? Does your ship burn up? I would say maybe. It might be an interesting balance for trying to run away to a planet side. But as of today, no, I don't think we're going to see that. There are some ships that have blast shields, like the Carrack, for example, has the retractable protection over the glass, which I find interesting considering that's an Anvil ship, and I do think that's one of the brands that has the diamond glass up front. But regardless, I don't think it's actually going to be something that's required. As far as a blackout for communications like we have for today's incoming craft, I mean, we're pretty far in the future with this game. I like to kind of think that we've actually got, I guess, more advanced technology that allows for you to actually maintain communication while entering the atmosphere. But we'll see. I mean, there may be some weird things that actually take place, and, you know, it's going to be fairly controlled since it sounds like you're actually going to be going through landing zones, at least to start, where you kind of go through the ring and then you fly down from there. So we'll kind of see. There's a lot of different ways they could go with it, but I'm not expecting either of those things to really be needed or happen. The Marine Gamer IGGHQ says, do we have any idea how time will work in the game, as in dates? Will we have Stardates similar to Star Trek, or are we going to going boring, simple style with something more current? I think your money needs to be on something boring and current if you go based on the way that their lore posts are actually done. You know, a lot of them where they're talking about news articles, it actually starts off with, you know, a year, date, and month. And I think if that's the case, that's what we're actually going to see. They talk about, you know, years and dates and months, you know, when they're talking about the just any news that gets released. So I think that's what we're going to see. I don't think it's actually going to be a star date. Michael Jacobs says, anyone know the future of the Hornet tracker, like jump point scanning or planet scanning? I think there's going to be some versatility there as far as the actual scanning is done with that Hornet tracker. I think its real purpose with this ship is more designed towards target tracking. You know, being able to act as a small command and control ship, being able to easily identify threats from a long ways off that, you know, a ship that didn't have the actual, you know, arc turret on the top would actually be able to identify. So I think it's going to be more of an early warning system, and it probably is going to be able to track multiple targets more effectively and share that information with other ships. I think that's the real purpose behind it. It's a combat scout type of ship. As far as jump point scanning and planet scanning, I mean, technically you've got the shield dish. I think you can use it for multiple different purposes. I think the question is going to be more about like the avionics and the equipment that's actually associated beneath it. My understanding is you've actually got the dome, and then under the dome you probably have the actual computing power that's going to be doing different purposes. So that might be a component that you can switch out for different purposes. You know, if you know you're not going out to really track a bunch of targets and coordinate a fleet, you might be able to change that out with something that focuses more on, you know, analysis of materials for planetary scanning, or maybe trying to find resources in a asteroid field. That's kind of where I think it would be going. I think by default it's combat focused, but I think you can probably end up changing what its focus is by making tweaks to your ship. Punk Hunter 25 says, hey STL, do you think that the Idris P will be able to haul much cargo to be both an escort and hauler when traveling with my corporation's Hull series ships? I know cap ships will have a high overhead cost, but by helping a few Hull E's, the profit will hopefully cover the overhead. I don't know if you can count on the cargo carried to cover the overhead of your operating costs on your Idris. That being said, you can hope to mitigate it, certainly. The Idris P, I believe, carries around 1,500 SCU of cargo. So it's not a ton for a ship of that size, but it is a good amount of cargo. But I think when you're talking about protecting a couple of Hull series that are actually traveling, and you're able to kind of add on to that for extra protection, for extra cargo being carried, I mean, you're going to be making more if you're able to carry more cargo. So It's absolutely got the ability to do it. I think the real focus of that cargo space is more designed for crew needs, ammo, those types of things. But, if you're not planning on being out for extended periods of time, I think you could absolutely maximize your cargo and then utilize that to help offset some of the costs. So again, I don't think you're going to break even, but you can help to lower the cost to help your overall profit. Nano says, question, what are your thoughts on Logitech acquiring of Saitek? And do you think Saitek future products will have better QA? Because I've heard some bad things about Saitek. Also, how do you think it will affect Saitek's line of Star Citizen products? So this is an interesting question. I personally haven't had a lot of issues with Saitek. Saitek was a really, really good company that ended up being purchased by Mad Catz, and Mad Catz, when they took that over, ended up bringing some poor quality control to their products. Now, they did a fairly good job of learning from mistakes, and what I mean by that is fixing a product. So X52 came out, X52, the first batch was pretty poor. They released another one, X52 got better. X52 Pro came out. The first batch that came out was pretty poor. After that, they got better. Same thing with the X55. I'm expecting the same thing with the X56. It's just kind of their trend. Now, they haven't necessarily learned a lesson. Like, let's just fix it from the beginning so we don't have that initial bad press. And I think that's where a lot of the problems have come. I've been using an X52 for a long time now and haven't really had any issues with it. And I think it's a really good joystick with a lot of options. Now, it's not going to compete with some metal stick that cost $400 or $500, but for what it is, it does a really good job. Now, as far as Logitech actually acquiring Saitek, I'm a huge Logitech honk. I love Logitech. Their products are great. I think they're really high quality. I think they have good options out there. Their ergonomics are good. I'm a big Logitech fanboy. So for me, if you take the design of Saitek and the quality of Logitech, I think you end up with a really good product. I think for Star Citizen fans out there, a lot of people should be excited about that acquisition. I think there's some concern that it's going to stop that collaboration between Star Citizen and Saitek, but I think it would be foolish of Logitech to stop that. They already have a design in place. Now they just have to put in their quality control and their components. And I think that people in the industry that are focused on gaming realize what Star Citizen is. It is a game changer of a game. It's going to change the landscape of what gaming looks like and what it's doing. So it would be silly for Logitech to bail on that product. So I think they're going to end up putting out their products for Star Citizen peripherals. I don't know. I would assume it's going to cause some sort of delay, but I would expect to still see them. LNX Gaming says, isn't the Reliant a starter ship? The Mustang is the combat starter, the Aurora is the balance starter, and the Reliant is the non-combat job starter. It focuses on trading. I think they wanted trade and combat to be the easy entry careers, with the others being a bit more specialized and require you to set out for them. So you're kind of right. The Mustang and the Aurora are the starters, and they've got different variants that allow you to focus more. And in those, you've got the Aurora MR, which is kind of your more well-rounded Aurora. Then you've got the Mustang Alpha, which is your more well-rounded Mustang. And if you want to really get down to it, I would say the best combat ship out of that group is actually going to be the Aurora LN. I think that thing is actually a really good fighter for what it's worth. So I don't necessarily agree with your assessment there. Now, the Reliant was actually sold as a quote-unquote semi-starter to where it's actually like it's sort of an entry-level ship, but it's not necessarily on the same level as an Aurora. It's supposed to give you a little bit better technology, a little bit more crew capacity, a little bit more cargo capacity. And I think even with that, you see different variants there, which are creating different roles that you can try and go down. Now, I'm not personally a big fan of the Reliant line. I think it's a cool looking ship, and they may make some changes. But my problem with the line is the core is the only one that I think is really a fairly good option, because we start talking about the Tana, the combat variant. I think there's ships that outgun it, outmaneuver it, outrace it. I think when it comes to the Sen, the Researcher, I think there's better exploration options. And I think I'm not really sure what the actual science portion of that ship is going to be, so I have a hard time recommending that. I think the Mako, the news van, is a cool ship, but I think it's also kind of a novelty. So I just don't have a lot of faith in the Reliant line where it's at today. We'll see where it ends up, but overall, my kind of opinion of the Reliant is, yeah, it's a semi-starter, but the core is the only one I really recommend to anybody. And for our Patreon questions, we're going to start off with one from Fodder. Says, any update on mobile device integrations, either for additional ship control layout or an app that allows you to interact with, say, auction commodity markets? Spectrum is going to bring some mobile communication. Their goal is to allow people to communicate with their friends in-game, out-of-game, from different places, including mobile. I think that's going to be a little bit further down the line, and I don't think we have enough details on what it's actually going to allow you to do. I don't think you're necessarily going to be able to, at least initially, to pull up your phone and say, I want to purchase 50,000 kilograms of silver because it's a really good price right now. I'll come pick it up later. That might be an interesting thing that you can do later on, but I think that's something that's probably a work in progress, if even that. But as far as like ship control layout, again, that's something else that they've talked about. Right now, it's probably best to be third party, just because we haven't even seen them really mention anything along those lines. The Rocket Power Grid is actually a really good option. I've got a video on that that's probably worth checking out, and it does give you some control by utilizing tablets. It connects over your Wi-Fi to your your system. And then for the final question from Penelope, says, I would be interested in hearing your thoughts about the Cutlass rework. Not a summary, really, but what would you like to see, and what do you think of what they have said so far, like getting rid of the docking collar? We actually got our first look at the new rework of the Cutlass during the anniversary stream, and it is awesome. It's more aggressive. It's actually stockier. It's kind of thicker. It's now got what I like to call the shoulder-mounted gun. So on top of that center section of the ship, you actually have additional firepower. You got rid of the kind of random trash can type thrusters on it. Overall, the ship looks less likely to break up. It's bringing more firepower, and it probably carries a little bit more cargo. And speaking of the actual docking collar thing, they kind of scrapped the docking collar, but in exchange, it looks like we're getting a wider entry ramp into the back, as well as the sliding doors on the side. So you're not going to be docking with another ship to try and board them. You're going to do more of an EVA action. Overall, I'm a huge fan of where it's at. I think Cutlass owners are going to be really excited by it. I think once it actually ends up being released, there's going to be a lot of non-Cutlass owners that become Cutlass owners, because it is really, really cool what they're doing with it. And if the firepower is there, it could end up being like a pseudo gunboat as well. And I think that's kind of what the developers were going for, especially when they started talking about it being a little bit more beast. So that's going to be it for this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you have questions, get them in the comments. Otherwise, stay tuned for a whole lot more. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.